Well, keep adding to the chat. So again, that's your name, where you are located, and a childhood commercial that comes to mind, or a mascot or a jingle. But we're going to go ahead and get started here. I am not Gina Roberts. I am Sarah Burkhead, and I will be your host today, which I'm really excited about. But we are your VDH Tobacco Control Program team, and welcome to Tobacco Free Tuesdays. We have Carrie Cannon from Northern Virginia and Tiffany Eustace from Northwest Virginia on our team, and we're really excited to have Lincoln Mondy here today as well. And we'll get to him in a second, but for those of you who've been with us, you know we always start with a poll, and if you're new, we like to ask a question before we start. So we have a what's the tea with tobacco question. So today's is, feel free to answer as many of these as you think are correct. Which of the following are real marketing tactics that big tobacco companies have done to target specific populations? Sponsored jazz and hip hop concerts, shipped care packages to overseas military troops filled with food, personal care products, and cigarettes, hired singing telegrams to deliver cigarettes to young adult birthday parties, gifted cases of cigarettes to residents of mental hospitals during the holiday season, or handed out free samples of menthol cigarettes from vans on city street corners. So we'll give you another couple seconds here to answer which one of these you think big tobacco companies have actually done to target specific populations. All right, last couple seconds. Let's see. Can you see the results? Yeah, so you all were absolutely right that big tobacco has done most of these. We did make one up, which is hired singing telegrams to deliver cigarettes to young adult birthday parties. But it sounds like something that big tobacco would do. So I can see why 54% of you thought that might have been a real one. But we are really excited to get deep here and talking with Lincoln about some of the marketing tactics that he's going to share with us as well. So thanks for participating in that poll. So without further ado, I'll introduce a friend of our tobacco control program. We're really excited that Lincoln is with us today. Lincoln Mondy designs campaigns, visuals, and strategy, advancing the health and power of young people. He is the Director of Communications and Strategy at Advocates for Youth, creator of the short film Black Lives, Black Lungs, and proudly serves on the Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan Washington, D.C. Board of Directors. Lincoln, thanks for joining us, and let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and the entire team for having me. I always love working with you all. And I'm excited to chat with you today around the film, the next film, and some of my work focused on how big tobacco transformed menthol into a black cigarette. So as Sarah mentioned, I design campaigns and video series and creative strategies that really focus on young people's health and power. I just want to say I am not a public health expert. That's you. My lane is really focused on the creative, focused on younger populations, and I really approach this work from sort of a creative research and sort of political strategy lane. And I lean on all of my wonderful doctors and public health experts to, do the everyday work on the ground. But I'm really excited to talk with you all a bit. A little bit more about me is that I'm based in DC, but I come from Farmersville, Texas, not to be confused with Farmville the game, although similar brands. And I really care a lot about the health of my communities. I care about clean air. And I care about sort of our entire society living up to our responsibility to make sure that all young people, no matter their zip code or their race or their disability status, are able and set up to lead safe and healthy lives. I do that in a kind of variety of ways. As Sarah said, mentioned, I am really involved with my local Planned Parenthood organization focused on rolling out gender affirming care and other things at the facility, as well as work at a national nonprofit called Advocates for Youth, where I focus on sex education, access to reproductive health services, and really sort of mobilizing and educating young people about their bodies and lives. So I would love to hear a bit about, what do you care about? I told you I care about clean air. I care about health and wellness. I care about Abbott season 2 getting renewed because it brings me joy. So I'd love to hear what you care about in the chat, whether it's professional or maybe a TV show, but what are some things that you care about? Would love to see what we care about in the room. Catherine cares about her family. Lauren cares about equality for all, snaps on that. Kathy cares about humanity, equality, and justice. Taya, helping people, all this public health and health equity. Yes, Charlotte, and health justice, Hannah, health and wellness for all. Ooh, we have horror movies, Avis. I do not care about horror movies because they scare me, but I do watch too much TV, and I love a good show. We said homeless population, LGBTQ issues, HIV prevention, and Colleen cares about being a positive light for others, which I think is just a great way to bring in all the things we care about and just remember that, you know, whether it's public health or other things, we care about a lot of different issues, a lot of different sort of populations, and we don't need to sort of take off one hat on Tuesday and put a different hat on Wednesday. We can care about all of these things at the same time and approach our work with that in mind. So thank you all so much for sharing what you care about. Cats, clean water, solving problems, youth being able to safely explore their passions, strengths, and creativity. Yes, yes, and yes. It's really exciting to see all of the passion in the room. So thank you for sharing that with me. So as some of you know, 5 years ago, I released a short film called Black Lives, Black Lungs. This film was really just focused on me wanting answers to some questions I had and going to the experts who had some of the answers, right? I was a college student at George Washington University, an intern at Truth Initiative, and I didn't really care at all about tobacco. I didn't think that it was urgent. I didn't think it affected me. I didn't think it was sexy or cool to focus on. And I actually just took the internship at Truth Initiative because I was late on all my other applications. So I was very lucky to come into an organization, not really having a lot of history or knowledge about it, but then really, really understanding that all of the perceptions I had were wrong, that this issue did touch me, and this issue was intersectional, and this issue did touch on so many urgent things and sort of things that I cared about. So I was motivated to do something about it. I was motivated to tell a story, and that story was specifically focused on how big tobacco companies successfully leveraged a 50+ year campaign through philanthropic ties, through lobbying, through marketing, through cultural connections in order to transform menthol into a black cigarette. What does that mean, that they transform menthol into a black cigarette? That means that as a kid growing up, I could tell you the colors of Newport packaging. You know we have the Dave Chappelle Black People Just Love Menthol jokes. We have the Cool Jazz Festival, so many sort of cultural ties to menthol, to where today people just automatically associate menthol with Black people without giving a second thought. And that's something that I did, and I realized that my family did. They just thought, Black people love menthol, you know, there's just something about it. It's really just sort of our product. And I was really focused on uncovering all the strategies that got us to there, right? My career really focuses on big picture cultural change. So when it comes to sex education, when it comes to reproductive health, really how our culture is impacted by entertainment and books and media that shares messages with us, whether it's we think we know or not. And that's what exactly I did with this film, is really following the money, following the corporate ties, getting into their heads when it comes to marketing and sort of their strategies. And I released it in 2017, thinking that, this was a fellowship project. I was graduating from college. I was starting a new job at a political affairs firm. And my mindset was sort of like, I've created this thing. I'm proud of it. I love it. Some other people are proud of it and love it, but I didn't really see it going to where it is now, to where I'm still talking about it 5 years later. And I've been able to, honestly, over the past 5 years, go to 150 plus Black churches and schools and theaters and NAACP conferences and all of these South by Southwest and all these different spaces to screen the film. And I realized that a lot of people had the same journey that I had, where they didn't really think it was an issue. They thought it was a thing of the past. But I'm really glad that I was able to start the conversation with this short film called Black Lives, Black Lungs. Shout out to my fellow GW alum. So Black Lives, Black Lungs, the first film that I released in 2017, is exclusively focused on menthol. Could I have some comments in the chat? What is menthol? Like, how would you describe menthol to your 15-year-old cousin? How do you describe menthol? A cooling sensation, says Catherine, calling a minty flavor. It's smoother draw, minty taste, minty flavored tobacco. Yes, all correct. Addictive and don't do it. Bad, addictive, minty. Yes, all correct. So I looked at menthol, really focused on how the industry was able to take a flavor. Menthol is a flavor like cherry and strawberry and juicy fruit, but create such a narrative to where the public and regulators believe that menthol is a separate beast that can't possibly be held accountable or researched or studied in the same way as other flavors. But when you're looking at it, menthol is a chemical compound. It's extracted from peppermint or mint plants. And it was first added to cigarettes in the 20s and 30s, but it became more widespread in the 50s and 60s. And as many of you said, menthol is a flavor additive. It's a camouflage to make the nicotine and the tobacco go down easier. As the CDC warns, it's easier to start and harder to quit. So I was really focused on, okay, I know my community, I know the Black community. Why was menthol specifically pushed and given price discounts in our communities? And why was menthol so sort of weaponized against us? And it's because it's easier to start and harder to quit. It makes the nicotine more addictive. And when you think about it, I think my peers, like younger people today, were just assume that people have always known that cigarette smoking is like bad for you, and that, if used intended, it would harm your health. But that is false. When cigarettes first came on the market, there were doctors who were recommending it, right? They were positioned as a stress reliever. You see this packet is branded that it's good for people who have asthma, right? Today, if you hear that, that's sort of like, duh, that's not true. But there was intentional marketing, intentional external validators like doctors and faith leaders and Black baseball players and Black civil rights leaders who were used to convey a different message about menthol. Because the person picked it up didn't receive the same harshness or the same sort of kickback on their throat, it makes sense that they might believe that doctors recommend menthol over other cigarettes, or that menthol, this minty flavor, could be something that could help your asthma. So I really focus on making sure people understand that what we know now about cigarettes and smoking is not what we knew then. And without the internet, without Wikipedia, without all of these sort of touch points we have, it makes a lot of sense that this company, these industries, had so much success in releasing a product and completely changing the narrative. Something that I focus on is that yes, tobacco companies' main product are cigarettes and e-cigarettes, right? But in actuality, if you look at their history and if you look at the trajectory of, America's first great enterprise, which is tobacco companies, their main product is doubt. They've always focused on leveraging doubt, on inserting misinformation to sway the public narrative. They focused on, creating things like the Tobacco Research Industry Council that may seem like an independent research facility, and these academic journals may seem as independent, but they're focused on seeding doubt, right? We know that the industry as early as the 40s have hired doctors and researchers and hired people away from colleges and academia in order to be validators, in order to sow enough doubt in the public consciousness to evade restriction and evade accountability. So you might have heard about menthol more recently in the past year, and I just want to play a quick feed from the Daily Show with Trevor Noah following the latest development on menthol. We have to, wait on a quick ad. Wait. Could be worse music, What are people having for their morning drink? Tea, coffee, what are we feeling? I'm having iced latte. I might have had too many cups already and it's only 9 a.m. Okay, here is where I want to show you.
Just in the last couple of minutes, the FDA is announcing it's working on a proposal to ban them within the next year, along with all flavored cigars. They've been disproportionately harmful for members of the Black community for decades. Menthol cigarettes have been marketed aggressively to Black Americans. More than 85% of Black smokers use menthol cigarettes.
The FDA's expected plan to ban menthol in cigarettes would be a victory for advocates who note the tobacco industry has targeted the Black community with menthols for decades.
It's making menthols cheaper in Black communities, more price discounts in Black communities, strategic partnerships with Black-led organizations, the Cool Jazz Festival, really a variety of ways to really focus on transforming menthol into a Black cigarette.
That's right. America is about to ban menthol cigarettes. And honestly, I'm all for it. Partly because tobacco companies have an ugly history of targeting menthols to Black communities, but also, just speaking for myself, I hate smelling that shit.
Always love a little levity from Trevor Noah. So that is what just took place in 2020, right? So we know the effects of menthol. We know that the industry has had decades of sort of unfettered access to litter Black communities with menthol. And my film, which was released in 2017, focuses on the Black public health experts who for decades have been ringing their alarm about why menthol is uniquely damaging, and for decades have been ringing the alarm about the tobacco industry's strategic targeting. But here we are. All of a sudden, now the FDA is ready to propose a ban on menthol. I will say that obviously many of you know that this comes from, I can't even count the number of research committees, the number of studies that have all shown that if taken off the market, menthol would have a positive impact on Black health and Black wellness. But the tobacco industry has been so focused on making menthol this separate beast that we're still talking about the ban today. And honestly, even though they announced it, we know that that ban is probably not going to happen within the next 5 years, if it even happens, right? We know that the industry's first tactic is to avoid regulation. And the first tactic is to sort of interfere with public health policies. So one thing I should note is that, remember when I was talking about how menthol is a flavor, just like all flavors? It's enjoyed different sort of privilege and access. So in 2009, many of you may know that Barack Obama signed the Family Smoking Tobacco and Prevention Act. I believe I got the name right, which banned all flavors in cigarettes and little cigars, except for menthol. The entire time, menthol was included in the bill because, again, Menthol is a flavor, just like cherry is a flavor, just like Starburst is a flavor. And we know that flavors encourage addiction and that flavors are focused on getting a new generation of people addicted. They're focused on young people, right? You cannot tell me that a Candy Crush Fruity Pebble Juul is not targeted for a younger audience, right? So in 2009, they won. They won by deploying their Black spokespeople. They did op-eds from Black law enforcement officials across the nation. They did robocalls, and they really leveraged Black people's valid anxieties with police and policing and surveillance in America to push misinformation that menthol ban is focused on the individual. But when we know that menthol bans are focused on the point of sale, meaning that menthol bans penalize retailers selling menthol and companies selling menthol, not an individual smoking menthol, right? But that doesn't really help the tobacco industry's talking point. So that's where we were with menthol. I released the film in 2017. I was sort of like, okay, this is it. But my film really exclusively focused on the past and how the past impacted Black people's present. However, right after I released the film, I started seeing the industry go in a completely different direction. And I sort of felt like I got because my film was so focused on the past that I didn't have enough time or attention on how they were pivoting for the future. So I feel like it's a leading question, but you have so this company, this industry, right? They have a product that is burdened by where they can advertise it, who they can advertise it to, right? They're burdened by having to have Surgeon General warnings. They're burdened by a massive body of evidence that shows that if used as intended, smoking harms your health, right? So what do you do when you've sort of lost? You've lost because public health has been good about educating the public about tobacco. You create a new product that doesn't have to adhere to any of those regulations. You create a new product that could be lifted up as, look over here and not over there, while at the same time doing the same tactics, while at the same time convening your personnel and your power and your profits around both products. So that's where the e-cigarette comes in. So we know that the e-cigarette did not just start with Juul, right? We have industry documents that shows that the industries started talking about electronic nicotine devices even in the 70s, right? We have patents from the 90s, but we had an evolution. So it started out, like you see, a Ciga-like. So something that looked like a cigarette, but was electronic, had a little light. You went to the vape pen and you went to the box mod. These three iterations didn't really concern a lot of people, especially in public health, because the box mod, it's so, you have to fidget with it, right? Like there's only a certain population that would invest in getting the different boxes and the chargers and the bulk, it's bulky, right? But when the vape pod came out, that's when I feel like everyone was sort of like, this will be a problem. It's smaller, it's sleek, it's sexy, it's Silicon Valley start. And so my next film is really focused on how the tobacco industry is really convincing the public and regulators that these are two separate industries that can't possibly be held to the same standards or the same accountability or the same regulation, while again, they're doing the same exact things that I showed in my first film. So when you think about how the cigarette was deployed, right here, right? So at this time, it was cool, right? It was new product. It was like something that would release stress. It was chic. It was seen as affluential. It was, the rollout is very, very similar to how Juul has been rolled out, right? It's this newer product. It's sleek. It has Silicon Valley ties, and it's the same sort of trajectory: misinformation, doubt. We also see the same sort of strategic ties with Black institutions that I highlighted in my first film. So this New York Times piece is, I want to say from 2020, but it could be 2019. But this piece broke the news that Juul was giving $7.5 million to Meharry Medical College. Meharry Medical College is one of only 4 historically Black medical institutions in our country. Meharry Medical College is the future of Black doctors, the future of Black veterinarians, our future Black public health experts. Jewel is smart in giving this institution, which I will say is not supported by the state, the government, or the public in similar ways to white institutions or PWIs. And we know that this is the same sort of scenario that the NAACP and the Thurgood Marshall Fund and other Black organizations found themselves in the 70s, right? And the 80s. No one else was giving them millions of dollars, right? And we know that these organizations, these institutions are so needed in our Black community. We know that they've been the site of organizing civil rights, right? We know they've been the birthplace of people like Kamala Harris and Stacey Abrams and so many other people who have graduated from HBCUs. So the tobacco industries are smart because they're dangling millions and millions and millions in funds in order to buy Black community members. And so Black student leaders invited me to Meharry, and we had a town hall with their institutions of why are you taking this money? Their main talking point, the school's main talking point, was that they were using the money to research vaping and e-cigarettes. And that this money would get Meharry into academic publications and really raise the profile of their work. When they were, shared with the fact that Dr. Phil Gardner and other Black experts that no medical journal and no public health journal would just take this publication without the conflict of interest being known that Jewel, the very company that they're researching, paid for the research, right? So I was seeing all of these things happening, and I'm like, well, now it's time to uncover those aspects. Now it's time to show my community members and to educate the public about how the tobacco industry is really focused on corporate sustainability. So I started working on my next film. It's also with Truth Initiative, and we are slated for premiere in September 2022, later this year. And really the question that I'm exploring is this question around why e-cigarettes, we know the evidence, why are they turning to e-cigarettes? How are they convincing the public and regulators to not have the same regulations or restrictions or accountability they have on traditional cigarettes with e-cigarettes? And this question on, can the entity that profits off of the problem, addiction, have a responsible and substantive stake in the proposed solution? The tobacco industry is trying to lift up e-cigarettes as harm reduction devices. So you have a scenario where they start the fires and then are paid to put the fire out. Another question I'm exploring is sort of, are we near a menthol ban, and what does that mean? So focused on where the industry is going, focused on uncovering their tactics when it comes to corporate sustainability. The film is focused on going further than the first film did. So I'm going to start in 1611 when tobacco seeds were first cultivated in Virginia. You can't tell the history of tobacco without telling the history of slavery, the history of colonization, the history of sharecropping, the history of racist capitalist systems in our country. And that's where I'm going to start. So we filmed in Virginia and focused on how tobacco was an early justification for slavery, how tobacco was an early justification for sharecropping. All of these things that we know are the tobacco industry's origins, and why and how the tobacco industry is attempting to move so far away from their origins that they're rebranding into a different company. I do want to play this video, which I think is like the best gift the tobacco industry could give me because it's such a not even veiled commercial. So take a look at this.
Altria is moving in a new direction. From our legacy to leading the way forward. Moving from smoking to potentially less harmful choices. And from being known as a tobacco company to being recognized as a tobacco harm reduction company. Moving beyond smoking. Altria.
So the next film will focus on that, how the industry is attempting to pivot I don't know why these images are so smushed, but I promise me and Sarah do not look like that. Let's see if these are. These are too. Maybe I'll show you in this version. Huh. Well, I filmed in Virginia. I filmed in Virginia 2 times. I filmed in DC this past weekend, and I filmed in Oakland, California. And just talking with experts, this is the Oakland shoot, talking with experts, getting their take, getting their perspective, and really focused on telling the story. This was the latest filming session this weekend in DC. So we have Gabe from the National LGBT Network, Denise from the Century Foundation, Alex, who's a young person focused on user design to help people to quit vaping, and Diamond, who leads Truth Initiative's youth activism programs. And I'm really excited about this next film. It's going to start again with origins. We're really focused on not repeating the first film, but going even further than the first film did, and focused on how tobacco, which started as a ceremonial, gift from indigenous populations, was co-opted and cultivated as, a cash crop, and then all of a sudden, so far away from its origins. So the film will start out with a motion animation from Dr. Damaris Hill's essay in 400 Souls by Ibram Kennedy. So I had the chance to record Dr. Hill reciting her entire chapter, which is basically a retelling, a memory of how tobacco washed ashore and sort of the interpersonal relationships between the colonizers, between Black people and indigenous people in the area around the tobacco as a crop. So I'm really excited about that. Really excited, as I mentioned, I just wrapped up filming in DC this weekend, and we had 4 excellent people who shared more around e-cigarettes, on menthol, their connection to the issues, and a lot of recommendations for public health from young people and people like that. So I'm really excited to do a lot of work to get a film out there in September, but I'm really excited that I was able to share that with you all and be in conversation with you all. And now I can take questions if we have them.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lincoln. I am so excited to see it. I didn't want it to end. I wanted to keep watching it. So I will be marking my calendar for September 2022 for the release, because I think it's a really, really important film that kind of continues your Black Lives, Black Lungs, which I absolutely loved as well, and very eye-opening and informative. We do have some questions, both from the registration and from the chat. So I'm going to go ahead. As you may know, for some of you who have been on our webinars before, I am not Nicole. So Nicole is out today. I'm going to try my best to take her place, but man, she is good with the questions, but I'll do my best. All right, so one of the questions that came in from the chat was, what about the continued portrayal of cigarettes, and really even e-cigarettes in movies and TV as a positive and cool thing? And this resonates with me too, because I watch a lot of Netflix, and I feel like it's really ramped up in some of the shows, particularly shows that are targeting young adults and young people.
Yeah, definitely. So I know that Truth Initiative does a lot of work around like smoking in the movies and things, and I do see a resurgence with e-cigarettes. I think, again, like public perception, 4 years ago, it still like really wasn't a debate that if like used as intended, smoking cigarettes will harm your health. But I think that now it's sort of, we're on the other end where we felt like we were winning on sort of the cultural aspect and the debate aspect. And now we're seeing a lot more tobacco industry representation and entertainment through e-cigarettes. I think something that I've always shared is that there are ways that we can organize as groups, as spaces, to call out these like production houses and companies. I work with a lot of production houses through my like career, and there's specific ones like Level Forward, that's Abigail Disney's imprint, that doesn't use real guns, that doesn't use that doesn't show cigarettes, and that commit to sort of having entertainment and film that is void of these substances. And so there is a scenario, there is a way where you can actually like organize young people, organize your peers to ask production houses, entertainment streamers, whatever it is, to commit to not displaying, these substances or these products in sort of that fashion or any fashion. I believe that's like bigger. When we get more granular, I think that you can always use those as sort of conversation starters with young people. So like if there is, you know, I'm gonna name a random TV show like Euphoria. There's an episode where there is like e-cigarette or whatever, like clip it. If it's a 2-minute scene, clip it and have a conversation about it. Have a conversation around like, did we see a lot of stress in Rue's life leading up to this? Yes. Is stress one of the things that the tobacco industry sort of leverages from people and like uses? Yeah. So I think for me, it's less like don't show it and more of like make sure people are aware of why it's being shown and the sort of ecosystem behind it that creates the influence and power that the industry does.
That's a great answer. And there is lots of research out there that when parents and caregivers or concerned adults in a young person's life use those opportunities as a conversation starter and let them know kind of what's going on, it can make a big difference long term. So I think that's a great way of framing it on a kind of an individual level, is really having those conversations with youth and young people about what's really going on behind them.
Behind the scenes, if you will.
Exactly. Exactly. There was another question. Hang on, let me pull up my notes. What makes a person think it's a good thing to start smoking or vaping? So advertising leverages a sense of lack.
Yeah.
And so do you think it's kind of the tobacco companies or tobacco industry really leveraging on that? You say doubt, but also that feeling like it's a kind of a stress reliever or one of those things that would make you feel better type thing.
Exactly. So I really do think that we have to like open our minds to like outside of tobacco education and public health. I think when you think about communities we're talking about, whether it's the Black community, the LGBTQ community, other marginalized groups, there's a ton of pressure. There's a ton of pressure from systems, from institutions, from everyday interactions that really we know, since we know that racism has a literal physical and mental impact on someone's health, produces stress, right? So when you have a scenario where these groups are under immense pressure and stress, honestly, from my perspective, it's like, no, like, I'm surprised if they wouldn't turn to substances. So I think that we're focused on sort of the end goal of like, okay, this person's smoking, let's get them to stop smoking. And I really want, and what my work focuses on, or like, what is in play and what are we lacking in gaps and supports for these communities that makes the environment so much so that they feel that they're able to reach for an e-cigarette quicker than they are able to get free mental health counseling, or quicker than they're able to get, you know, they can get probably green apple flavor e-cigarette at a gas station, but they can't get an actual green apple at a gas station, right? So thinking about all of these like social determinants of health in the ecosystem is really important. And at the same time, talking, like, I think this, you know, we've done a lot of progress in this space, but talking to community members who smoke or vape, you know, in a way where you're opening up the conversation to understand that context, and not only talking to them in the context of tobacco control, because at the same time, while we know that there's so much pressure and stress, we also don't want our communities to turn to those substances, right? So I think it's going to be better off for everyone involved if we are aware of the context, if we don't ignore it, if we don't ignore sort of the stressors, the pressure that are coming from these communities. And I would say that helping them find other healthy coping mechanisms, right? So that's why I love talking with James, who works on like conflict resolution and like, you know, restorative justice, and really figuring out what are the strategies, because you can't just take something away, right? You need to be able to offer something valuable. And I feel like, you know, even 7 years ago, it was sort of like, I'm talking to this person about smoking, and when they stop smoking, I'm out of the door and like we're gone. Versus I'm talking to this person about smoking, they're really stressed because they don't actually have any childcare, but I know this organization that offers free or affordable childcare, so let me connect them with them, and maybe that would help some of the stressors, and maybe that would help the cessation, right? So I think looking at it as a bigger picture.
Yeah, I really like that, looking at globally kind of what's going on in a person's life that could help both support and like you said, the social determinants of health, really looking at what is going on. And I loved your point about being able, more easily able to buy a green apple e-cigarette
Yes.
than it is to buy a green apple. That one really hit home for me because that's so true. It's so true. Along those same lines, what could we do, as there's lots of different people on this webinar from all different walks of life, what could we do to support and move, make sure that the community is aware of these disparities, and how can we kind of promote it?
Yeah, I would say to first not instinctively assume that they're not aware, and to sort of have your listening sessions, right? So like, I think anytime before you approach a new community or approach a new project within the community, really understanding, like even outside of public health, like what are they reading? What are they watching? Who are their like influencers, and not influencers in the sense of like social media, but like, is it a faith leader? Is it a mayor in the community? Is it, you know, a radio personality in the community? Because your work is going to be so much more impactful if it's actually relatable and relevant. So I'd say first, do your research and not do your research before you start talking to people in the community, and just really sort of have an outlook of like, okay, what are the, if we're talking about the Black community, right? What is the Black radio station? What is the Black papers, right? Have they talked about this issue before? Have they covered this issue before? What frames, what lanes? Because you're going to learn a lot about, oh, I didn't think about, you know, this, I didn't think about that. And it's just going to help your work become better. So I'd say, do your research in terms of like power mapping, listening, talking to community educators and things like that, but not in an extractive way, but really focus on like, yes, I want to get their answers to these questions and I need this project to be better or this like deliverable to be better, but like, what can I give them? Because I think a lot of the time as researchers, as public health, we sometimes forget that we're leaning too much on the extraction lane, where we just want this person's story, we just want this person's opinion or research, or we just want this person to join this call, without considering what is something that I can offer that would also be a mutual beneficial thing. So again, like the scenario of like a young person, you know, who is 17, who maybe you want to interview and get their positions on like a youth group focused on e-cigarettes, right? Well, first, like, figure out what do they want at those meetings, right? Is it food? Is it pizza? Is it, you know, like, what are those things that where it'd be like not just totally extractive, but also maybe they want to learn about your career. Maybe they want a, you know, job fair in public health to where, okay, yes, we're getting this information, but also here is something that we can provide. We can provide free, you know, career advice. We can look at your resumes. We can, you know, do other things. And I think just getting more into that mind of like every conversation you're going in with a different community than your own, what can I do to offer something and be less extractive and transactional in this exchange?
It's a very good point, because I think sometimes with the best of intentions, we want to get information, but we're not always listening as well as we could, but also there's not that mutual benefit. So what can we do to kind of meet their needs as well? So absolutely. There was some questions in the registration that I just wanted to bring up real quick. Were you surprised that vaping companies were kind of taking a page out of Big Tobacco's playbook with the advertising?
Not at all. Not at all. I think it's really I just think it's, I know I'm biased, but I'm like, they didn't even try to hide their intentions in that commercial, right? Like it just is so visceral. And so the answer is no. I will say that I was surprised that they allowed or they didn't purchase a stake in Juul sooner. I think that they were already developing emerging products and then they saw Juul as a competitor and then absorbed it. But I think I was surprised that Juul didn't start as a big tobacco company, that it was formed into a big tobacco company. But nothing really surprises me at this point, especially like reading all the documents and seeing like how they write about my community or communities and things like that. So no.
And kind of along that, that questioning, I feel like, you know, we make progress sometimes with regulations and strategies, and then something else happens. Like, how can we get ahead?
Yes.
Do you have any good ideas? How can we kind of head off the next emerging product or head off the next, like, I feel like we made so much good progress and then it kind of went sideways a little bit?
Yeah, yes.
Any
yes,
good
yes.
ideas?
Wow, great question. So I think, you know, and I'm saying the royal we here in the public
Yeah,
health
the big
community, correct.
we.
I think that we kind of got a little complacent with our strategies. I think, you know, in the DARE program, the 90s, the 2000s, like it was very like scare tactic focused. And I think we lost a big youth generation because A, they didn't see the issue as urgent, and B, they felt like shamed and like stigmatized. So I think that we held on to the, you know, rolling out the Black lung in class and like the photos, we held on that for far too long because millennials and now Gen Z are just so, they're just not, that's not their vibe whatsoever. And I think public health, if we had younger and more diverse staffing, that would have been aware 10 years ago. And then that would have been a situation where there would be more young people in the movement and more young people educated as to why this is urgent. I also think that if we earlier on, you know, when I released this film in 2017, I was in so many uncomfortable rooms where people just didn't even want to say the name of the film and they were just uncomfortable about the social justice framing and the lens and me even, you know, and this was at the height of Ferguson. And so it was, I had to do a lot of persuading, a lot of pitching, a lot of being, you know, the uncomfortable person in the room all the time. But I think that if that wasn't the case, and if there was more of an approach to the whole person, the whole body sooner, then there would have been so many people, more people like me in this space. Because when I started, I almost like was like, this is not for me. This space is not for me. This was not built for me. I need to be in a more creative, more diverse space. And so the space, and I'm not going to toot my own horn, but the space almost lost me, right? Like I was sort of like, this is too much work to convince too many people at too high levels, at too many different organizations to go with this framing, right? Because it was like, who is this young person telling us like this and this? But I truly think that with the emergence of e-cigarettes, if we had more of a youth base and a more diverse base where it was sort of we did all that infighting and work 20 years ago, we would have been so much more set up. So I think that means it's even more true that we should be focused on making sure that there's, you know, so many more voices in the room from not even just public health, but even like opening it up to like different spaces and different lanes, because that's the only way we're going to be able to form a coalition of people to do this. I think that's what worked with the Black community. I mean, like AATCLC and other Black-led organizations, like they are really focused on Black faith leaders and Black churches and Black sororities and Black theaters, right? Not just talking to public health people. And that's why they've done such impactful work, is because they've spread it out across industries. And so I think that is one. Yeah, and the other is that we've known about e-cigarettes for, you know, for so long now. And I think that we just lost the ball with being so hyper focused on like 0% cigarette usage that we didn't really notice that while cigarette usage was declining, e-cigarette usage was like jumping and skyrocketing. And so that would be my long-winded answer.
A long-winded but a great answer, and it was very, I think, important to really capture voices from all different areas, but then also that youth voice too, making sure that we have a diverse and a young or a youthful perspective represented in things that we do. So I'm gonna wrap that up. His documentary, he answered it in the Q&A. It will be on YouTube for free, so we're very excited, and we will let you guys know when that's out, because believe me, we will be promoting it, because we're very excited. But I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah to wrap us up.
Yeah, thank you, Lincoln. We are so grateful you persevered through your storytelling, through your art and your work. I know it has moved a lot of us who are in tobacco control. It has helped us with our messaging, to engage community members, to talk about menthol, to talk about the targeted practices of tobacco companies. And we're so looking forward to your next film to continue that. So we are very grateful that you persevered. And I think one thing that really struck me too is looking at that prevention, looking at mental health and vaping. There's a lot more information that's been coming out on the connection between those. But I do want to remind everyone that for those youth and adults who already are using, vaping and tobacco products. The National Youth Tobacco Survey results came out this week, and 2/3, 65% of youth who vape reported seriously thinking about quitting. We know 75% of Virginian tobacco users have a desire to quit. So how can we support those who want to quit? We know menthol especially can make it harder to quit. So how are we using our evidence-based practices, what we know around cessation? So, check out livevapefreeva.org, check out quitnow.net/Virginia, and check out lincolnmondy.com, his own site. I know Tiffany linked to it, but maybe you can do that one more time so people can find all things Lincoln and keep up with all of his great work. But we have one more poll here. We'll return to the T. So we want to know from you all, how do you plan on using this information that Lincoln has shared? So check all that apply. Will you add information through your health education or through your support in making policy changes? Will you share information with individuals that you know who use tobacco products? Will you share Lincoln's documentaries on social media sites? Organize groups to watch these films followed by discussion? And I'm going to add in a listening session there. Or will you just shout this out from the rooftops to everyone you know? Or are you not sure yet how to use it, which is okay. We hope you'll loop back with us and share even more information, but we're curious how this has inspired you. So we'll add a couple more seconds here to reply. All right, so most people, hold on, share the results. They're going to start adding this information in their health education and in supporting policy changes. They can come back to some of these statistics and best practices and information. We love that. And they'll share your documentaries. So we'll help with that. Like Carrie said, we'll send links. But we're glad to see that most of you were also inspired, like I know we were, by Lincoln's messages today. We do want to plug our next Tobacco Free Tuesday is going to be Tuesday, April 19th. And we're really excited to have someone from the National LGBT Cancer Network with us. They are our national partner around tobacco use in our LGBTQ plus communities. So we're really excited to have them join us. There's also an Eliminate Tobacco Use Summit coming up for colleges and universities on Wednesday, April 20th and Thursday, April 21st. So we'll put links in that in our follow-up email. But Lincoln, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing everyone soon.
Thanks so much, team. Have a good one.